Welcome to The Art of Adventure. This is episode 284 with Alex Banayan. The Art of Adventure is the podcast where we look at human potential, entrepreneurship, unconventional lifestyles, and cutting-edge science. I'm your host, lead explorer, and guide, Derek Loudermilk. You can find the show notes for this episode at derekloudermilk.com, along with other things like upcoming books, workshops, events, all the good things. All right, so today's guest, Alex Banayan, when he was a freshman in college, before his first year exams, he procrastinated and instead hacked the Price is Right, where he won a sailboat, then sold it and used the prize money to fund this multi-year quest to learn from the world's most successful people. So over the next 7 years, he basically pursued a graduate degree in persistence and perseverance from the University of Life. He snuck into Warren Buffett's shareholders meeting. He chased Larry King through a grocery store. He celebrated with Lady Gaga at the hottest nightclub. Along the way, he landed one-on-one interviews with people like Bill Gates, Maya Angelou, Steve Wozniak, Jane Goodall, Quincy Jones, and lots more. And I'm interviewing him today about this journey and this concept that he discovered, which is the idea of the third door, which is basically there's the front door, which is where 99 people try to get in. And then there's the VIP door, but there's always a third door, which is like running down the alley, bribing someone, sneaking through the kitchen, whatever. There's always a way in to get what you want. Alex has since gone on to deliver keynotes to organizations like Apple, Nike, IBM, Dell, MTV, and Harvard about his experiences. And I wanted to get him on the show. First, it's a fascinating story, but he's been interviewed quite a lot. So I wanted to really dig into the feelings and experiences that he was having at some of these key moments along his journey. Tipping points where things might have gone a different way for him. And you'll be able to tell Alex is a great storyteller. He's super enthusiastic, and he's still quite young, and so just a really remarkable guy. So without further ado, here is Alex Banayan. Alex Banayan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, man. I'm very excited.
This is really cool for me because as I was reading your book, The Third Door, and you're reaching out to all these people, and I was like, I really love this guy from the book. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to reach out to him. And this power of, being able to connect with people and interview them and learn from them is pretty cool. And I think one thing that this book did for me and probably a lot of readers is it opens up people's minds to what's possible and that there's more things possible than they ever thought before. And I'm curious about the process for you. Like, how did this book help show you what was possible?
I think that sort of nails what the heart of the book is about. Because on the surface, it's a book about, business and success. And at the heart of it, it really is a book about possibility. Because if I've learned one thing over the years, it's that, this was a 7-year journey. And if there is one thing I learned over the past 7 years, it's that you can give someone all the best tools and knowledge in the world, and their life can still feel stuck. But if you change what someone believes is possible, they'll never be the same. And there were a lot of moments on the journey that changed, my perceptions of what's possible. Obviously, a big one was, getting to eventually, track down and meet and interview all the people who, in my college dorm room I was dreaming of, whether it was Bill Gates for business or Lady Gaga for music or Steve Wozniak, Quincy Jones, Larry King. And there was even the next step of when you're in the room with these people that for Bill Gates, I spent 2 years trying to track him down. So when I finally was in his office, saying that he was a human being, and with, his own quirks and his own, obviously talents, but limitations. And it's very humanizing. And lastly, I just think that when you go out to achieve a dream and you are hit by a flurry of, rejections and failures, you learn about yourself in a way that you never could while, sitting in a classroom and reading a textbook, or, sitting at home and watching Netflix. The world really has this way of, teaching you who you are through hardship and through adversity. And I think that's been a big thing for sure.
We can read your book and be like, oh my gosh, that's possible. But then there's the difference of like you going out and experiencing it, that there's no way you would have known what all this would be like until you actually do it.
Right. And I think there's like a huge value in reading books that have, really honest stories. For me, I remember, being 19 and reading Tony Hsieh, the CEO of Zappos' book, Delivering Happiness, or, Howard Schultz, the CEO of Starbucks' book, Pour Your Heart Into It. And, reading these stories of people who were terrified and whose parents told them they're making, the biggest mistakes of their life, and still somehow manage to find the courage to just take one thoughtful step forward anyway, helped me find the courage within myself that I didn't know I had. So in many ways, this is 7 years of me, absorbing as much as possible, the stories and the lessons from the people who I looked up to most, and hopefully passing it along in a way that's really practical and transformative for the reader.
And so what I'm hearing actually is with these stories from like Tony Hsieh and your own book, we can't quite get to having the actual experience, but if the stories themselves are as sort of honest and vulnerable, then that's getting us as close as we can to being able to have the experience, rather than just sort of like, here's the steps and here's the process. If we can really immerse ourselves in someone's experience of that, which is, the book is, it follows your journey, but it's not necessarily about you, but you're the vehicle for teaching this stuff.
That's exactly right.
So when you got into Bill Gates' office, was it what you expected?
No. I was this like naive, 20-year-old kid. I thought, obviously logically I didn't think this, but there was a part of me subconsciously that thought like, like money rains from the ceiling and like everything's made out of like, heavenly gold, or like, obviously logically I knew that wasn't the case, but there is a part of you, look, if you put anyone on a pedestal for years, you walk in with definitely hopes that it would be a life-changing and transformative experience. And while, the lessons I learned from Bill Gates were amazing, I asked him about his sales secrets, about his negotiation secrets, just the ability for the 2-year journey. In theory, an 18-year-old college student with no connections and no credibility should not be able to sit down with Bill Gates. It's sort of like how the world, is structured. And being able to find, my way to his office and be able to learn from him directly, those 2 years taught me more than, anything I could have read in a book.
Yeah. I'm curious. So you developed this quest to interview all these people. And there's a quote in The Alchemist, Paulo Coelho's book, that when you have a quest or a goal, the universe conspires to help you. And I'm curious what your experience was sort of like good luck or being in the right place at the right time, happening to sort of get all these doors to open for you.
I think about luck a lot because, of course, you can't really talk about success and not, discuss luck. And first of all, I think I'm extremely lucky. And I also think that most people grossly underestimate and misunderstand luck. I think, 90% of the luck in my life is the fact that, where I was born, born in the United States, born in the 90s, born in Los Angeles, born to parents who, although there were things that, they could have done better. They tried their best every day to, give their kids lives better than lives they had. My family's from Iran. They came to America as refugees. And I definitely know if I was born in my grandpa's generation in Iran, there would be no third door.
Yeah.
So I think that's like 90% of even the luck equation. And, the 10% of it is, one of, my favorite chapters in the book talks about how luck is very much like a bus. You miss one, there's always going to be the next one, but if you're not prepared, you're not going to be able to get on. And I think that for every lucky experience that I talk about in the third door, there were like 50 unlucky experiences, which I talk about some of them in the book, but there's a lot that couldn't even make it in the book because there were literally just so many. There were times where I would like there was this one time I was, trying to get an interview with Jay-Z, and, it took a year to finally get in his office and meet with his team. And I'm with his team, in the conference room. It's 6 p.m. We're talking about the book, and it's going great. And, after an hour, I'm like, hey, can I use the restroom? So I go to the restroom. I'm gone for 3 minutes max. I come back and I'm in the conference room, and the guy I'm meeting with, he's like, dude, you are an idiot. I'm like, why? He's like, the second you walked out, Jay walked in, spent a minute here, and then left. And I was like, you got to be kidding. And there's been dude, dozens of moments like that where I was trying to get an interview with I remember one time I was with will.i.am, and I went to an event to meet him, and he wasn't there, and then I left, and then I checked Twitter, and he showed up 5 minutes after I left, and there for every miracle that happened, there was 50 near misses. And I just think that if you're like that quote says, if you're at the bus stop and you're ready, even if you miss one, there's always going to be a next one. But if you're not ready, you'll never be able to get on.
Yeah, I like that. I was curious about, you were talking about circumstance. 90% of luck is just the circumstance that we find ourselves in. But different people take advantage of circumstance differently. And it's, I guess it's that preparation. So I'm curious about if you already had this sort of identity. Obviously you thought, I can do this project. You didn't take yourself out of the game when you started where someone else might have been like, this sounds really hard, I'm not going to do it. But just maybe you could talk about sort of how your perception of your own capabilities sort of grew through this project.
Well, I think, part of your question you answered a little earlier with that Paulo Coelho quote, which is, the Paulo Coelho quote, it doesn't say, if you're at a networking event, the universe will conspire in your favor. No, it says, if you have a very specific goal or dream, the universe conspires in your favor. And I think a big part of, circumstance is also knowing what you want. And, you can be in the right place at the right time, but if you don't know what you want, nothing happens. And I think that's probably the hardest part for people, which is, if you don't know what your passion is, if you don't know where your path is, how to even, begin. And there's, a lot of things I recommend to people who are searching for their passion, but even just a very quick one, is even if you don't, let's say I'm talking to someone who's super young, 19 years old. Even if you don't know what you want, know at least what area or what topic you're interested in. Because there's a big difference between someone saying, what are you interested in? And you say, I don't know, versus what are you interested in? Saying, well, I'm interested in tech, I'm interested in investing, and I'm interested in entertainment. What do you recommend? It's just a giant difference.
Yeah. And I was thinking about how, even when you're just sort of interested in something, how you were talking about how studying for prepare for medical school was just not pulling you, and then giving up studying for your final to go on The Price is Right. Clearly, this crazy thing was pulling you way more. It was way more motivating for you to try to figure out how to hack The Price is Right. I don't know. It's just weird to think how some things just grab people and sort of pull you in, sort of big, identifying the beginnings of an obsession or something like that. Yeah. So I'm curious, maybe you could talk about that feeling of when you decided you had to go on The Price is Right? Like how did it feel to commit to doing that instead of studying for a final?
Huh. How did it feel? It felt like I was procrastinating and being sort of an idiot at the time. But what I think about this a lot too, which is not to compare myself at all with the magnitude of what they've done, but something that most people don't know is the difference. There's a very surprising similarity between Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg, which is that both Microsoft and Facebook were started during the week before final exams in college. The week where people are supposed to be studying, and you sort of get a week off from class to study for your finals. And I find that really fascinating because it's a very big question of what are you doing when you're supposed to be doing what your quote unquote job is, whether it's like to be a student or your job. What are you sort of sneaking off doing? And like I love going and seeing college students who are like in their biology classes, but like trading sneakers deals on Instagram in class, or like maybe they're whatever they're doing or whatever they're obsessed with is normally a very, and again, I think there's a big difference too between like procrastinating and just scrolling on Facebook and actually like being obsessed with something that you're using all your time in. And I think that those things that society calls procrastinating is actually a sign for what you're supposed to be doing. And I know for me, whether it was the night before final exams and going on The Price is Right to fund this book, or all the other nights where I was supposed to be in the college library, but I was researching how to get a book deal and studying how Tim Ferriss got his book deal, and trying to track down people to get interviews and tracking down authors to get advice. And I wasn't being paid to do it. In theory, I was paying to actually be in school. I went to school. I was paying tuition. I was paying to be doing something else, yet I was quote unquote procrastinating to do this other thing. And it turns out this other thing is, if you believe in fate or a calling, very much what my calling was.
Yeah, I really want to know about this experience of going on The Price is Right, and you stayed up all night and you hacked it, and you got to this like crucial moment where you had to, the producer who chooses people, he has to like you, and you're like trying all these things, and it comes down to like you have to come up with something for him to put you on the list, but he's not doing it. Just what was that experience like, that particular moment, which was like could have ended the whole thing?
I think there's like something really beautiful when you really, really, really care about something and you try and you fail, and then you realize you actually have nothing to lose to try again. So other than like shame, like society has this very good job of, there's, implicit and explicit lessons in our childhood, right? For example, an explicit lesson is, your parent, your mom tells you, eat your vegetables. That's an explicit lesson. And then there's an implicit lesson of your mom, you see your mom at 2:00 in the morning eating like chocolate ice cream in bed. That's the implicit lesson. And it's the implicit lessons that have the strongest hold on us. It's the implicit lessons that have the strongest hold on us. And when you look at, persistence in our childhood, let's say you want to be on the baseball team and you try out once and you don't make it, and maybe you try out a second time, you don't make it. If you are like crazy enough to try it a third time and you still don't make it, what does your mom or the people who love you the most say? Maybe you should try basketball. Like those are the people who love you the most. And although they're not telling you a explicit lesson about persistence, there is an implicit lesson, which is, you can try once, you can maybe try a second time, but if it doesn't work the third time, you got to sort of maybe pack up and, try something else. And, that moment you're talking about with The Price is Right, or whether it was, my journeys to get interviews for the book, or whether it was the journey to make the book a reality, what I've learned is that when it comes to persistence, when it comes to making a dream a reality, you have as many at-bats as you're willing to give yourself.
And which of these people did you take the most at bats with, or when did you sort of like go past?
Well, in the moment, like definitely Larry King, because I had chased him through a grocery store. But I would say like over time, it took 2 years to track down Bill Gates. It took 3 years to track down Lady Gaga. So some of these were really long quests. With Warren Buffett, it was this 8-month, saga. So all of them were adventures in their own rights.
And were there any times where you did sort of, after a number of tries, you're like, okay, that's it. I don't want to pursue this anymore, where you sort of limited your at-bats?
Yeah, probably for the ones that I probably didn't care as much about. I still cared about them enough to try. But there's this great, very famous anecdote of, if I told you that there was a burning building across the street, and on the, second story, there's a $5 bill, and if you go in, like, it's yours, finders keepers. What are the chances you're running into that building?
Almost nobody's going to take that.
Yeah, 0% chance. If I told you in that same building on the second floor, the person you love most in the world is, asleep on the second floor, you wouldn't even ask me where they are because you would already be running in so fast. Yes. And the reason that anecdote is so powerful is the flames didn't change, the building didn't change, the obstacle and the challenges didn't change. What changed was how much you cared about the end goal. And I've learned when it comes to achieving a goal that it's about finding something that you care so much about that you'll find a way, because at the end of the day, there's always a way.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I'm curious about sort of the domino effect and how these things sort of one thing leads to another. And you sort of explicitly had a domino. Okay, I need a publishing deal before I can talk to Bill Gates. Okay, before I can get a publishing deal, I need an agent. How do you think about sort of lead dominoes, or if you do at all?
I definitely think it's important, especially if you're doing something that's uncharted. So, if you want to be a doctor, it's like pretty clear what you have to do. You got to go to, college, take pre-med classes, take your MCATs, apply to medical school. There's a very clear, defined institutional path.
Yeah.
If you're trying to start something, whether it's a startup or write a book or, create a musical career, even get a job at a company that isn't hiring, where there's no job postings, but you really want to work there. If you're doing anything where there's not a clear path, the best thing you can do for yourself is before going out to do it. There's sort of three options. There's the people who just run really fast. It's the problem, which, I admire their ambition. And then there's the people who are so afraid they don't even take one step. But I do think there's a very beautiful middle ground where before just sprinting into it, you spend as much time as you can researching the system. Let's say it's a job, that you want to get at a company that is hiring. Okay. Who are the executives at that company? Who makes the hiring decision? What department is it? Okay, is there a different hiring hiring process for that different department versus, the other departments that Okay, do you have any friends of friends who work at the company? The more you can understand, you call it the dominoes or whether it's the system. If there's one thing that I learned from The Price is Right is that life on the outside looks like random luck, but most things, especially things designed by human beings, there is a system to it. And if it was designed by a human being, that means there's a system to it, which means there's probably a way that you can figure it out. And some are just harder than others.
Yeah, I love that. Even whether the system was sort of intentionally created or the system just happens to be there because of circumstance, but understanding
And
like how the
human
pieces are.
beings, and if there's human beings involved in the process, humans are emotional beings. Even the most stoic of people, still they're emotional beings. And if you understand how human beings work, or at least if you have a better understanding than most, it'll help you find a way.
Yeah. I have one more question about, you have a lot of mentors, but the one that sort of stuck out for me was this guy, Elliot Bisnow, in your book, founder of the Summit series. And sort of he's living, I think his motto is like, do nothing small. And, he's just like what you're talking about, emotional, doing emotionally engaging big things. And I'm just curious what sort of impact knowing Elliot had on you, or if you could just talk a little bit about that relationship.
I think there's this quote that I read once that said, respect the people that make time for you in their busy schedules, but love the people who never check their schedule when you need some time. And I think those are the most beautiful relationships in life. With Elliot, it started out as I cold emailed a stranger on the internet. And, I used the Tim Ferriss cold email template literally from the book. Like, I'm my own guinea pig. I used the Tim Ferriss cold email template, reached out to this stranger named Elliot. And not only did we meet, our 15-minute meeting turned into a 4-hour meeting, and we ended up spending that whole summer, traveling the world together. And not only did he become a mentor and a best friend, but he became like a brother to me. And I think moments like that are, the things that, when you're 90 years old, you still remember. And I'm grateful for a lot of people who really helped along the way on the journey. But Elliot in particular really was there every step of the way. And, I couldn't be more grateful.
Yes, it was really just wonderful to read about that. And, very sort of that's what inspired me to reach out to you. I think part of the book that stuck out to me the most. And I'm just curious, now that you've met all these people and, you're doing interviews, you told me you just got back from Japan, which is amazing. How do you think about your personal network and sort of managing the connections that you have and, trying to, because relationships take investment and, they say add value, all these things. Like, how do you think about your relationships and network?
It depends what stage in my life you would have asked me this question. Right now, I'm in a different stage than I was maybe even like a year ago or 2 years ago. And I'm sure I'll be in a different stage a year from now. Where I'm at right now is I'm really grateful about how the book is doing. And so I would say the way I think about it is I don't, and I try to spend time as much with, the people I love, my mom, my sisters, my best friends. And I also think that if you are thoughtful, if you, when it comes to, you use the words, connections or network, I think it's important, and it takes a long time at least it took me a long time personally, to understand there's a difference between your best friend, a friend, an acquaintance, a colleague, and someone you just met. Yes. And someone you don't know. Like, they're all different. And there are, appropriate things for each one. For a best friend, you can ask for help like 5 times in a row, and like that doesn't really strain the relationship as long as you're not like being obnoxious about it. And that doesn't strain the relationship. With someone you don't know, even asking them for one thing might strain the relationship. So there's like being, and it's taken, years, probably a decade for me to like start to like fine tune that understanding. And then also realizing too, if like being okay with people saying no and not having to fine tune things perfectly, and understanding that like if people want to help, not only want to, are capable of it. Sometimes people want to help and they genuinely can. They don't know that person well enough to make an introduction. They don't have the time to, review, what you just sent over, even though they want to help. and just trusting life a little bit more. So I would say that's sort of the stage I'm in now. Trying to. I'm definitely a work in progress, though.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. Thanks for that insight. Yeah, I just want to give you the opportunity, if there's something that you haven't mentioned yet that you think is important to share, or that I haven't asked you about, this is your chance to share that.
I'm just, first of all, super grateful for you, having me on your show. And, this was really fun to just sort of talk about all the different, it felt like we were sort of like covering the top line of this whole story, from The Price is Right to, where things are now. And to me, it's just been a super fulfilling 7 years. It took 3 years to do all the interviews. It took about 3 to 4 years to do all the interviews, another 3 years to write the book. It came out last year. Last year was the US book tour. This year has been the international book tour. So it really has been this giant labor of love. And, it just makes me extremely happy, hearing that, you read the book and you enjoyed it. It means more to me than I can say.
Well, I just want to acknowledge you. I mean, 7 years is no short amount of time, and you're still doing book tours. You're still talking about this stuff regularly, so you'll probably be at it for a while longer. So yeah, just love that you're out there helping people imagine that bigger things are possible, and I know you're changing a lot of lives. So just want to thank you for that, and thanks for coming on the show, Alex. It's been a pleasure.
That means a lot, man. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. See you, Alex. All right. Another great episode from Alex Banayan. And he really inspired me. When I read his book, it really changed the way I thought about what was possible, or even what's reasonable to expect. And until you sort of see some examples of people pushing the limits, and this could be in sports, in business, in whatever areas, until you see some examples, then you might not believe it's possible. But very quickly, you can shift your thinking around what's possible for you. And that definitely happened for me when I read this book. So hope you got something valuable from this episode. And we'd love to hear from you. Either send me an email, or Alex, or get in touch with him on Twitter or Instagram. And if you have questions about the episode, you can send those to me, Derek@DerekLoudermilk.com. And if you got value from this episode, then chances are your friends and family will as well. So we'd love for you to share it with them via your social media. And if you haven't left a rating and review for the show, then my personal request for you, if you've made it this far for listening, then obviously you enjoyed listening to the episode. Would love for us together to help more people. And one way that you can do that is with a quick 5-minute, probably even less, favor by just jumping on iTunes or whatever platform you listen to the show and leaving a quick rating and review of the show. And you can mention specifically what you learned from this episode and if you recommend it. And that will help boost the show up in the rankings and let other people find out about these interviews. All right. Thank you so much for listening. Now it's your turn to go out there and be adventurous.